we're studying yoga and kind of its origins and beyond posture and how kind of where it came from. And so Dr. Sharma, actually, she's our professor, so she recommended that we all come to the conference and are we good?
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
We're good.
But I'm interested we were talking about neuroplasticity and like brain waves, and I was wondering how exactly those are measured and how you can go from data in terms of like these blips and be like, this is someone thinking about mindfulness and awareness, and this is someone having a thought from somewhere else. How do you go from data to actual conclusion?
Well, so you have to design experiments in this domain so that you take into account that you have two things that you're interested in. You're not just interested in brain activity or biological measure, but also how that biological measure is related to something about consciousness awareness. So, you just have to be aware of that in your design of an experiment. So typically the way it's done is you'll have some kind of contrasting states of awareness that people are asked to go into, and the only way to have some degree of confidence that maybe they were able to enter a meditative state, or during the state where they were not supposed to meditate and they were not meditating, is to also have some report from them. But then you collect biological data, whether it's EEG or fMRI, different biochemical measures. Some of the slides I didn't get to, they've now done looking at taking a blood sample and see the state of epigenetic kind of control of the white blood cells, which genes are on or off in certain states of consciousness. But you take some biological measure while people are in one state versus another, and also get some report from them to kind of quantify that, yes, the design had some validity. There was an ability that people seem to experience of actually having a different state in the two different biological measure kind of periods, and then you look at the data. Is there something that shows up either? And typically these experiments are done either looking as a state effect or a trait effect. So before and after some training, you might do some measures. And it's important also, if you're going to do that kind of a study, that you have a control group that doesn't engage in the training, because one of the things we know, is there's a lot of variability for any given biological measure that you can get from different people, from the same person at different times. So, these are all the different factors that are important, but in the end, when you take all of this into account, including, these two different domains of internal experience and some objective biologically measurable things, if you take those into account in a serious way in the design, you can get something.
And do you find that it's more difficult when you're studying something like meditation, because it's very much an inward sort of reflection and there's no external stimuli, that it's more difficult to measure, or you're just solely going off of your group and how they are actually just telling you how they feel?
Yeah, so we do not have any objective measures that are well validated at this point to say, oh, okay, we see this happening in their brain. We know they must be experiencing, a state of samadhi or a state of deep relaxation. We have some measures that can be tested that way. Some measures, there's a group that has picked up on some of the data I was presenting before about some of the decrease in the kind of overactive default mode network in this posterior cingulate, which is the kind of central node of the default mode network. Based on that, they designed a paradigm based on looking at real-time feedback of people's level of posterior cingulate activation while they're in the scanner, and they see a kind of bar, and they're trying to keep that bar as low as possible, which corresponds to having a decrease in the activation of their posterior cingulate. And they did find that when they did that, people reported they were in a deeper meditative state. So that's an example of, an early attempt to use some of the measures that we've now gotten from looking at meditative states and try to, test, well, if we see somebody going into that state, do they reliably report that they are actually experiencing a different kind of consciousness in the way that we predict. But at this point, that's been done one time. Who knows if it's reproducible? And we just don't have enough knowledge about how the brain does change in relationship to these kinds of experiences to be able to, use that kind of knowledge in a real reliable and prospective way, like you're suggesting. It is kind of the logical extension that if there really are physical changes in the body and brain that accompany any given mental change in internal experience, subjective consciousness, that such experiments will be possible at some point. But we don't have it well mapped out at this point, so it's not yet possible.
Well, that's all the questions I have. Do you guys have anything else you want to ask?
Nope.
No? Well, thank you very much, Dr. Khan.
You're welcome.
It's a pleasure.